Radiation is often called the invisible killer. Back in 1986, when Reactor Number 4 exploded at the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant, the people of Ukraine and Belarus who were caught in the disaster still remember how incredibly blue the sky looked that day and how fresh and clean the air felt. But later, they came to understand the horrifying truth. While they were breathing in that beautiful air, their bodies were being silently pierced by relentless waves of radiation. Hello everyone! Now imagine this. What if that deadly radiation hadn't been released by accident, but was deliberately unleashed for one purpose: to kill as many people as possible? And what if the ones who planned it weren't aliens or some evil force from beyond, but ordinary human beings, scientists just like any other? Welcome to our channel. You might be thinking, no way, something like that couldn't possibly be real. Then let's dive into the story of the neutron bomb, a weapon designed to wipe out entire cities, and the shocking reasons behind its creation. The unique nature of the neutron bomb. From a nuclear physics standpoint, the neutron bomb doesn't differ much in its basic structure from a traditional hydrogen bomb. Just like the hydrogen bomb, the neutron bomb is built using a two-stage design. In the first stage, there's a small nuclear device that acts as the trigger, setting off the main explosion. During this initial blast, the plutonium-239 nuclei split apart and collide with surrounding atoms, creating a powerful chain reaction. That nuclear fission reaction creates an unbelievably intense heat, and that extreme temperature kicks off the second and much more powerful stage, the thermonuclear reaction. What happens next is no longer fission but fusion, where lighter atomic nuclei smash together and form heavier ones in an incredibly energetic process. It's this fusion reaction that unleashes the terrifying force we recognize as a thermonuclear explosion. In terms of how it detonates, the neutron bomb goes off in exactly the same way. But the key difference is that the neutron bomb is built specifically to enhance radiation, making that its main feature as a weapon. The ultimate purpose of a neutron bomb is to release a massive wave of high-speed neutrons. To amplify that deadly burst of neutrons, it uses a special material known as tritium. Tritium is a radioactive isotope of hydrogen with a half-life of around 12 years and 4 months. In a standard hydrogen bomb, you might only use about 3 or 4 grams of tritium. But in a neutron bomb of the same size, several times that amount gets packed in. That changes the entire composition of the explosion's destructive effects. In a hydrogen bomb, most of the energy is spent on things like the shock wave, intense heat and thermal radiation, and electromagnetic pulse. But in a neutron bomb, all of that combined only makes up about 20% of the total energy. The remaining 80% is unleashed in the form of high-velocity neutrons. The history of its development. In a way, the idea behind the neutron bomb was almost inevitable. During the Cold War, military strategists were deeply troubled by the fact that any area hit by a nuclear strike would be rendered unusable for a long period of time. Even if they won a war, they worried that all the buildings and infrastructure in the conquered territory would be completely destroyed, and the radioactive contamination would make it impossible to live there for years. So, in the 1950s and 60s, while nuclear weapons development was rapidly advancing, a small but influential group began exploring a new idea. What if there were a weapon designed to kill only the enemy's troops while leaving the infrastructure untouched? One of the voices that supported this concept was Samuel Theodore Cohen, a scientist who had worked on the Manhattan Project, the program that created the world's first atomic bomb. Cohen took this idea and gave it a clear definition, and by the late 1950s, he had begun turning it into a concrete technological plan. This brilliant physicist, known for his unique sense of ethics, was the very person who introduced the concept of a radiation-enhanced warhead, or as it's officially called in English, Enhanced Radiation Weapon, abbreviated as ERW. In his own words, Cohen was determined to develop a thermonuclear bomb that would be more suitable for the battlefield. According to his vision, the bomb wouldn't need overwhelming explosive power, but instead, it had to unleash an extremely intense burst of neutron radiation. And even if it ended up killing more people than a conventional nuclear bomb, Cohen didn't see that as a problem, because to him, what mattered was that it would minimize the destruction of buildings and critical infrastructure. With Dr. Cohen's proposal in hand, American labs and testing facilities began experimenting with radiation-enhanced warheads in the early 1960s. As a result of those efforts, by 1963, the United States successfully conducted an underground neutron bomb detonation test. And by the 1970s, mass-produced neutron bombs were officially added to America's nuclear arsenal. Then in 1977, President Jimmy Carter approved the development of neutron weapons for use by NATO's European forces. But not long after that decision, a wave of public backlash erupted, and critical reports from both American and European media led to the temporary suspension of neutron warhead production. That suspension didn't last long, though. In 1981, under President Ronald Reagan, production was quietly resumed. Naturally, the number of neutron warheads that have been stored since then is a closely guarded state secret. However, what is known is that out of the 9 countries known to possess nuclear weapons, only 4 are known to have developed neutron bombs: the United States, Russia, France, and China. As for how far each of these countries has gone in developing their neutron weapons, almost nothing has been made public. The only confirmed fact is that on November 17, 1978, the Soviet Union officially announced it had successfully tested a neutron bomb. Interestingly, it was later revealed that the effectiveness of the neutron explosion in that test had been significantly exaggerated. We'll come back to that point and take a closer look at it later on. Intended areas of use. By the 1980s, the military had already abandoned the idea of using neutron bombs for localized attacks on tank units. But back in the early days of the Cold War, during the 1950s and 60s, there had been strong internal support within the armed forces for deploying neutron bombs as tactical nuclear weapons. At the time, the media and critics began referring to the neutron bomb, often with biting sarcasm, as the humanitarian bomb. That nickname was meant to highlight the cold-blooded nature of the weapon, which could wipe out people while leaving buildings completely intact. Of course, the original design wasn't meant for use on cities. It was intended for tactical strikes against groups of armored vehicles. In fact, even a neutron bomb with just a 1 kiloton yield was calculated to be deadly enough to kill the crew of a tank from over half a mile away. For high-speed neutrons, even armor plating that's nearly 6 inches thick doesn't pose much of a barrier. The soldiers inside would still be pierced by the cloud of neutrons and die. At most, tank armor can block only about 10% of the incoming neutron stream. And yet, the tanks themselves, as well as any nearby structures, would be left completely undamaged. On the other hand, destroying that same 6-inch armor at the same distance with a traditional thermonuclear bomb would require several times the power. But doing so would obliterate not just the tank crews, but also the surrounding buildings, infrastructure, and everything else, leaving the entire area heavily contaminated with radiation for years. So, at least in theory, the lethal radius of a neutron bomb, when it comes to human targets, is far greater than the physical blast radius that would destroy buildings. Just thinking about the advantages of a neutron bomb gives you a chill. It feels brutally pragmatic and disturbingly realistic. Still, it wasn't this inhumane nature or the blurring of lines between conventional and nuclear weapons that ultimately led to the neutron bomb's fall from grace. The real reason was much simpler. On a tactical level, neutron bombs just didn't work as effectively as expected. That's because in open air, the stream of neutrons spreads out way too quickly. High-energy neutrons react almost instantly with atoms in the air, especially the nitrogen and oxygen atoms that make up most of it. A poet might put it this way: the source of life defeats the source of death. In other words, because the air itself weakens the radiation, the actual effective range of a neutron bomb ends up being much smaller than what the theory predicts, and the shockwave and heat become the dominant effects. So in the end, all the supposed advantages of the neutron bomb get wiped out completely. That said, the neutron bomb wasn't entirely abandoned. With the arrival of the space age, it suddenly found new attention as a potential weapon for intercepting threats in space. In the thin, almost empty environment of space, neutrons can travel enormous distances without being stopped. Even better, a cloud of neutrons can cover a much wider area than a conventional nuclear blast, making it far more efficient in open space. To destroy an object in orbit with a traditional nuclear warhead, you'd need to detonate it at extremely close range. But with a neutron weapon, even the faintest touch of its radiation cloud is enough to do the job. Just a small burst of high-speed neutrons can throw off the electronics inside a satellite or an intercontinental ballistic missile, damaging the internal circuits and causing them to fail. The missile or satellite might keep flying through space, but by that point, it's nothing more than a lifeless hunk of metal. So if you detonate a neutron bomb above a warhead in flight, you can knock out all of its electronic systems, and the missile will fall short of its target, rendered useless. The same approach makes neutron bombs incredibly effective for disabling satellites too. And because it doesn't physically blow the target apart, you don't end up scattering dangerous space debris into orbit. On top of that, even if a neutron bomb goes off in space, there's no risk of contaminating Earth's atmosphere with radioactive fallout. There's one more advantage, and it could matter a lot to future generations. After all, they're the ones who will have to deal with the massive amount of space junk that's been piling up in Earth's orbit for decades. Compared to the wreckage left behind by regular nuclear weapons, debris that isn't radioactive will be way easier and safer for them to handle. That's because any radiation from a neutron bomb fades away much faster than the contamination caused by a typical thermonuclear blast. The moral dilemma. When the neutron bomb first emerged, it sparked a firestorm of controversy over the ethics of a so-called clean nuclear weapon. The man who invented the neutron bomb remained firmly convinced, right up until his death, that radiation-enhanced warheads were far more humane than traditional nuclear strategies. Cohen laid out this seemingly contradictory belief in great detail in his memoirs. According to him, the neutron bomb was more humane because the scale of destruction it caused was smaller than that of a standard nuclear explosion. For instance, Cohen argued that even if you had to wipe out an armored division, there was no reason to destroy entire neighborhoods or reduce critical infrastructure to rubble. His reasoning may have been murky, but he believed that using low-yield, precision-controlled nuclear weapons like the neutron bomb in actual combat could prevent mass civilian deaths. Only frontline troops would be killed. He even claimed that the tragedy caused by a neutron bomb wouldn't be nearly as horrific as the devastation left by a conventional nuclear blast. But is this really true? Unsurprisingly, many critics completely rejected Cohen's supposed humanitarian motivation. No one believed that dying from radiation was somehow better than being incinerated by a wave of nuclear fire. In reality, human tissue exposed to neutron radiation breaks down slowly, and those caught within the lethal zone are reported to suffer for 2 to 7 days before dying in excruciating pain. And even for those lucky enough to be just outside the immediate blast zone, the radiation sickness would eventually catch up with them, and death would come not long after. But what critics feared most wasn't just the suffering. It was the fact that neutron bombs blurred the line between nuclear weapons and conventional ones. If that line vanished, nuclear arms would no longer be seen as a last resort deterrent meant to stop the annihilation of humanity. They'd just become another kind of ordinary weapon of mass destruction. And once that happens, the only thing waiting down that path is the total collapse of human civilization. The truth is, the debate over whether the neutron bomb should ever be used has never been fully resolved, even to this day. So, what do you think? If you found this topic interesting, we'd love it if you'd leave a like or share it with others. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, take care and goodbye.